The golden light of a setting sun painted the dusty main street of Promise Creek as Katherine Daniels stared out the stagecoach window, her hands trembling with the letter that had sealed her fate, a marriage arrangement made by her brother, selling her off like cattle to a man she'd never met in a town she'd never seen. Property of the heart. The year was 1875, and the untamed lands of Colorado Territory were as unforgiving as they were beautiful. The stagecoach lurched over another rut in the road, jostling Katherine against the wooden side panel. She winced, both from the impact and from the words in the letter she'd read a dozen times since leaving Boston. "You'll be well provided for," her brother Samuel had written. $500 is what it took to secure you a husband out west. A fair price for your security, considering our circumstances. Katherine folded the letter carefully and tucked it into her reticule. At 22 years of age, she had never imagined her life would come to this, being sold off to pay her brother's gambling debts. After their parents' death last winter, Samuel had quickly squandered what little inheritance they had, leaving them destitute. His solution had been to arrange this marriage to a stranger in a frontier town, someone willing to take a bride sight unseen in exchange for cash. The stagecoach driver called out as they approached Promise Creek, and Katherine straightened her spine, determined not to show fear despite the dread pooling in her stomach. Her green traveling dress was wrinkled from the 3-day journey, and wisps of auburn hair had escaped her once neat bun. She pinched her cheeks to bring color to her pale face and tried to calm her racing heart. "Promise Creek," the driver announced as the stagecoach rolled to a stop in front of the town's only hotel. End of the line. Katherine gathered her meager belongings, one carpet bag and a small trunk, and accepted the driver's hand as she stepped down into the dusty street. The small frontier town consisted of little more than a main street with wooden buildings on either side. A saloon, general store, blacksmith, and the 2-story Promise Creek Hotel made up the heart of the settlement. "Miss Daniels?" A thin man in a dusty black suit approached her. "Samuel sent a telegram you'd be arriving today." "I'm Hiram Wilson, the town clerk." "Yes, that's me," Katherine replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "I understand I'm to meet my intended." Hiram nodded, looking uncomfortable. "Yes, well, there's been a slight change. Mr. Blackwell was supposed to meet you, but he's been delayed at his ranch. Your brother made arrangements with him some weeks ago, you see." "I see." Katherine clutched her carpet bag tighter. "And where am I to stay until Mr. Blackwell arrives?" "The hotel, of course." "Your brother wired ahead with payment for 3 nights. Mr. Blackwell should arrive by then." Hiram glanced around nervously. "I should tell you, Miss Daniels, your brother's arrangement with Mr. Blackwell is somewhat unusual for these parts." Before Katherine could ask what he meant, the sound of approaching hoofbeats drew their attention. A tall man on a black stallion rode into town, his presence commanding and powerful. He wore a weathered brown hat that shadowed his features, but even from a distance, Katherine could see the breadth of his shoulders and the confident way he sat in the saddle. "That's Jackson Thomas," Hiram whispered. "He owns the largest cattle operation north of here. Just passing through, I imagine." The rider dismounted in front of the saloon, tying his horse to the hitching post. When he turned, Katherine caught her first clear glimpse of his face, strong jaw covered in several days' worth of stubble, piercing blue eyes, and sun-browned skin that spoke of years under the open sky. He was handsome in a rugged, untamed way that made her breath catch. Jackson Thomas noticed her staring and tipped his hat slightly before disappearing into the saloon. "Come along, Miss Daniels," Hiram said, breaking her trance. "Let's get you settled at the hotel. Mrs. Peterson runs a respectable establishment." Katherine allowed herself to be led to the hotel, her mind still on the mysterious cowboy. She had 3 days before Mr. Blackwell would arrive to claim her as his bride. 3 days of freedom before she would be bound to a man who had purchased her like property. Mrs. Peterson was a plump, friendly woman who showed Katherine to a small but clean room on the 2nd floor. "Dinner's at 6 sharp, dear," she said kindly. "You look like you could use a good meal and some rest after your journey." Once alone, Katherine sat on the edge of the bed and finally allowed herself to cry. The tears came silently, mourning the life she'd once known and the dreams she'd been forced to abandon. In Boston, she'd been teaching at a small school for girls, finding purpose and joy in education. Now, She was nothing more than a commodity, traded to settle her brother's debts. After washing her face and changing into her one good dress, a simple blue cotton with white lace at the collar, Katherine made her way downstairs for dinner. The dining room was mostly empty, with just two traveling salesmen at one table and a middle-aged couple at another. And there, at a corner table alone, sat Jackson Thomas. He looked up as she entered, his blue eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. Katherine nodded politely and took a seat at the table farthest from him, though she could feel his gaze following her. Mrs. Peterson brought out a hearty stew with fresh bread. Eat up, dear. You're much too thin. Thank you, Katherine murmured, realizing how hungry she truly was after the long journey. She was halfway through her meal when a shadow fell across her table. She looked up to find Jackson Thomas standing before her, hat in hand. Evening, madam, he said, his voice deep and resonant. Mind if I join you? Mrs. Peterson's dining room seems unusually empty tonight. Katherine hesitated, knowing she should refuse. A proper lady didn't dine with strange men, especially not handsome cowboys with eyes that seemed to see straight through her. But something about his direct gaze and the respectful way he waited for her permission made her nod. Please, she said, gesturing to the chair across from her. He sat down with surprising grace for such a large man. Up close, she could see the fine lines around his eyes, laugh lines, and a small scar that cut through his right eyebrow. Jackson Thomas, he introduced himself, extending a calloused hand. After a moment's hesitation, she took it. Katherine Daniels. New to Promise Creek, he asked, though she suspected he already knew the answer. Yes, just arrived today. She didn't volunteer more information, unsure how much the town knew about her arranged marriage. It's a small town, Miss Daniels, Jackson said, his eyes studying her face. Word travels fast. I heard you're here to meet Emmett Blackwell. Katherine's cheeks heated with embarrassment. Yes, we're to be married. Jackson's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in his eyes. Interesting. I know Blackwell. Didn't realize he was seeking a bride. It was arranged rather suddenly, Katherine replied, uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. By your brother, I understand. Katherine stiffened. You seem remarkably well informed about my personal affairs, Mr. Thomas. A slight smile touched his lips. Like I said, small town. Hiram Wilson couldn't wait to share the news that Samuel Daniels had paid Blackwell $500 to marry his sister. The blunt statement struck Katherine like a physical blow. The entire town knew she had been sold like property. The humiliation was almost more than she could bear. If you'll excuse me, she said, rising abruptly. I'm quite tired from my journey. Jackson rose as well, but reached out to gently catch her wrist. Miss Daniels, wait. I apologize for my directness. His touch sent an unexpected warmth up her arm, and she found herself pausing despite her embarrassment. Emmett Blackwell is 53 years old, Jackson said quietly. He's buried 2 wives already, and he's looking for someone to keep his house and bear his children. He's not a cruel man, but he's hard and bitter. Is that really what you want? Katherine pulled her arm free. What I want ceased to matter the moment my brother decided my worth in dollars, Mr. Thomas. Good night. She hurried from the dining room, fighting back tears for the second time that day. Once safely in her room, she leaned against the door, trying to calm her racing heart. 53. Old enough to be her father. The reality of her situation crashed down upon her with new weight. This wasn't just marriage to a stranger, it was a life sentence with a man 3 decades her senior, a man who had buried 2 wives already. Sleep eluded Katherine that night as she lay awake, considering her options. She had less than $10 to her name, not enough to purchase a ticket back east, even if she had somewhere to go. Samuel had made it clear there was no place for her in Boston anymore. She was trapped, caught between her brother's debts and a future as Emmett Blackwell's 3rd wife. Morning came with no solutions, only the harsh reality that her future had been decided for her. Katherine dressed in her green traveling dress again. She had only 3 dresses to her name and went downstairs for breakfast, her eyes shadowed from lack of sleep. The dining room was busier this morning, filled with travelers and locals alike. There was no sign of Jackson Thomas, and Katherine told herself she was relieved rather than disappointed. After a breakfast of eggs and biscuits, she decided to explore the small town, needing fresh air and a chance to clear her head. Promise Creek was larger than it had first appeared. Beyond the main street were several residential streets with modest homes, a small schoolhouse, and a white steepled church. Katherine found herself drawn to the schoolhouse, peering through the windows at the empty classroom inside. "Looking for work?" a female voice asked behind her. Katherine turned to find a woman about her own age, dressed in a practical brown skirt and white shirtwaist. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a simple bun, and her friendly face was dotted with freckles. "No, I was a teacher in Boston," Katherine admitted. "I'm Abigail Gray, Promise Creek schoolteacher," the woman said with a smile, extending her hand. "We're between terms right now. School starts again in 2 weeks." Katherine shook her hand. "Katherine Daniels. It's a pleasure to meet you, Miss Gray. Please, call me Abigail. We don't stand on formality much here in Promise Creek." She studied Katherine with intelligent eyes. "You're the young lady who's to marry Emmett Blackwell, aren't you?" Katherine's smile faltered. "News travels quickly, it seems." "I'm afraid so. It's both the blessing and curse of small towns." Abigail's expression turned sympathetic. "Would you like to come in for tea? I live in the rooms attached to the schoolhouse." Grateful for the friendly overture, Katherine followed Abigail to the small living quarters behind the classroom. The space was modest but homey, with bookshelves lining one wall and colorful quilts adorning the furniture. As they sipped tea, Abigail proved to be a kind listener, and Katherine found herself sharing more than she'd intended about her circumstances. "So your brother arranged this marriage to pay his gambling debts?" Abigail asked, her brow furrowed. "Yes," Katherine admitted. "After our parents died, Samuel changed. The gambling, the drinking. When he told me about this arrangement, he presented it as an opportunity for both of us to start fresh. It wasn't until I was already on the stagecoach that I learned the truth." "That's terrible," Abigail said. "And now you're to marry Emmett Blackwell. Do you know him?" Katherine asked, dreading the answer. Abigail hesitated. "Everyone knows everyone here. Mr. Blackwell keeps to himself mostly, out at his ranch. He's not known for his gentle nature. His last wife died 2 years ago. Mr. Thomas mentioned he's buried 2 wives," Katherine said quietly. "You've met Jackson Thomas?" Abigail's eyebrows rose. "Briefly, at dinner last night. He seemed concerned about my situation." Abigail smiled. "Jackson's a good man. Owns the Starlight Ranch north of here. He's got the largest herd in the territory and employs half the young men in the county. He comes to town every few weeks for supplies." "He seemed to have a poor opinion of Mr. Blackwell," Katherine observed. "There's history there," Abigail replied cryptically. "But Jackson's fair-minded. If he's concerned, there's likely reason to be." The conversation left Katherine with even more worries about her impending marriage. After thanking Abigail for her kindness, she returned to the main street, her mind troubled. She was so lost in thought that she didn't notice the group of cowboys until she nearly collided with one of them outside the general store. "Well, what have we here?" The man was young, maybe 20, with a cruel twist to his mouth and alcohol on his breath despite the early hour. "You must be Blackwell's mail order bride." Katherine stepped back. "Excuse me, please." The cowboy moved to block her path. "Not so fast, pretty lady. Seems a waste for an old man like Blackwell to get such a fine-looking woman. Maybe you should sample what a younger man has to offer before you tie yourself down." 2 other cowboys snickered behind him. Katherine's heart pounded with fear as she looked around for help, but the street seemed suddenly deserted. "Please let me pass," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I don't think so," the cowboy said, reaching for her arm. "We're just getting acquainted." "Take your hand off the lady, Curtis." The commanding voice came from behind her. Katherine didn't need to turn to know it was Jackson Thomas. Relief flooded through her. Curtis immediately dropped his hand, his cocky expression faltering. "We were just having some fun, Thomas. Doesn't look like the lady shares your idea of fun." Jackson moved to stand beside Katherine, his presence solid and reassuring. "Why don't you boys head back to the saloon? I believe your boss is looking for you." Curtis and his friends shuffled off, muttering under their breath. Jackson turned to Katherine, concern evident in his blue eyes. "Are you all right, Miss Daniels?" "Yes, thank you," she said, her voice still shaky. "They just startled me. Curtis Wells works for the Bar None Ranch. He's more bluster than threat, but I apologize you had to deal with that." Jackson offered his arm. May I escort you back to the hotel? Katherine hesitated only briefly before accepting his arm. The solid strength of him beside her was comforting after her fright. I met Miss Gray this morning, she said as they walked. She seems very kind. Abigail's one of the best things that ever happened to this town, Jackson agreed. She's transformed that schoolhouse. Before she arrived 2 years ago, most of the children weren't getting proper schooling. She mentioned you own the Starlight Ranch, Katherine said. Jackson nodded. Been building it up for 7 years now. Started with just 50 head of cattle and a rundown cabin. Now we've got over 2,000 head and 15 men working for me. That's impressive, Katherine said, genuinely admiring his accomplishment. It's home, he said simply. They reached the hotel, and Katherine reluctantly released his arm. Thank you again for your assistance, Mr. Thomas. Jackson, he corrected. And it was no trouble. He hesitated, seeming to wrestle with something. Miss Daniels, I hope you don't find this forward, but I'm concerned about your arrangement with Blackwell. Have you met him before? No, Katherine admitted. It was all arranged by my brother. Jackson's jaw tightened. And you have no say in the matter? My brother made it clear this was the only option. He's in financial difficulty. So he sold you to pay his debts. The blunt assessment made Katherine flinch, but she couldn't deny the truth of it. Miss Daniels, Katherine, Jackson said, his voice gentler. You don't have to go through with this. There are other options. Are there? Katherine asked, unable to keep the bitterness from her voice. I have no money, no family except a brother who sees me as a commodity, and no prospects. What options would you suggest, Mr. Thomas? He met her gaze steadily. I need a teacher at the Starlight Ranch. I have 6 cowhands with children, all school age, and no way to get them to town for proper education. The position comes with room and board, and I can pay a fair wage. Katherine stared at him, stunned by the unexpected offer. You're offering me a job? You don't even know me. I know you were a teacher in Boston. I know you're intelligent and brave. His eyes held hers. And I know no woman should be forced to marry a man she's never met, especially not one like Emmett Blackwell. Hope flickered briefly in Katherine's heart before reality extinguished it. My brother received $500 from Mr. Blackwell. I can't simply disappear. I'll handle Blackwell, Jackson said with quiet confidence. And your brother? Why would you do this for me? Katherine asked, searching his face for answers. Something softened in Jackson's expression. Let's just say I've seen what happens when women are treated as property rather than people. It doesn't sit right with me. Before Katherine could respond, a commotion from down the street caught their attention. A wagon was rolling into town, driven by an older man with a gray beard and weathered face. Even from a distance, his scowl was visible. That's Emmett Blackwell, Jackson said, his voice tight. He's early. Katherine's stomach clenched with fear as she watched the man who was to be her husband. He was powerfully built despite his age, with broad shoulders and large, gnarled hands that handled the reins with practiced ease. His clothes were dusty from the trail, and his face was deeply lined from years in the sun. He looks formidable, she whispered. Katherine. Jackson's voice drew her attention back to him. My offer stands. You don't have to do this. She looked from Jackson to Blackwell, torn between the safety of the path laid out for her and the uncertain freedom Jackson offered. Before she could respond, Blackwell had spotted them and was guiding his wagon toward the hotel. That's my bride, Thomas? Blackwell called out, his voice gruff. Didn't expect to find you sniffing around her already. Jackson's posture stiffened, but his voice remained calm. Miss Daniels and I were just talking, Blackwell. She arrived yesterday. Blackwell climbed down from the wagon with surprising agility for a man his age. Up close, his eyes were a cold gray that assessed Katherine like she was a mare at auction. You'll do, he said with a nod. Your brother said you were educated. Can you cook and keep house? Katherine swallowed her indignation at his manner. Yes, Mr. Blackwell. Good. We'll be married tomorrow and head back to the ranch after. He turned to Jackson. You can be on your way now, Thomas. This is family business. The lady just arrived yesterday, Jackson said evenly. Maybe give her some time to get her bearings before rushing into marriage. Blackwell's eyes narrowed. I paid good money for a wife, and I aim to get what I paid for. The arrangement's been made. She's not a cow at auction, Blackwell, Jackson said, his voice hardening. She's a woman deserving of respect. Mr. Thomas, Katherine interjected, sensing the rising tension between the men. Thank you for your concern, but Mr. Blackwell is right. Arrangements have been made. Jackson looked at her, frustration evident in his eyes. Katherine, please, she said quietly. This is my situation to manage. After a tense moment, Jackson nodded stiffly. As you wish, Miss Daniels. He turned to Blackwell. I'll see you around, Emmett. With a final look at Katherine that held both concern and something deeper she couldn't name, Jackson walked away. Blackwell watched him go with a scowl. Thomas has always been one to stick his nose where it doesn't belong. Come along, girl. We've got things to discuss. He led her into the hotel's small parlor, where they sat in uncomfortable chairs. Blackwell wasted no time with pleasantries. Your brother wrote that you're 22, healthy, and educated. That true? Yes, sir, Katherine replied, trying to keep her voice steady. Good. I need a woman who can keep house, help with the ranch accounts, and bear children. My first wife gave me one son before she died of fever. Second wife couldn't conceive. I'm looking to expand my family line before I get too old. Katherine fought to keep her expression neutral despite the cold way he discussed such intimate matters. I understand. I'm not a gentle man, Miss Daniels, Blackwell continued. The frontier doesn't breed gentleness. But I won't mistreat you as long as you do your duty. You'll have a roof over your head, food on your table, and my protection. That's more than many women get out here. May I ask about your ranch, Mr. Blackwell? Katherine asked, desperately trying to find some common ground. 500 acres, mostly cattle grazing. House is solid, 2 bedrooms. Got 3 hands working for me year-round, more during roundup. It's 10 miles outside town, so you won't be coming in often. He eyed her critically. Town life makes women soft and gives them ideas. A ranch wife needs to focus on her home and husband. Every word he spoke confirmed Katherine's growing dread. This marriage would be a prison, not a partnership. But what choice did she have? The wedding will be tomorrow at noon, Blackwell said, rising. I've already spoken to the preacher. Nothing fancy, just the legal necessities. Be ready to leave afterward. With that, he left her sitting alone in the parlor, her future mapped out with no regard for her wishes or feelings. Katherine remained there for some time, struggling to hold back tears. Eventually, she made her way upstairs to her room, where she finally allowed herself to cry. The walls of her life were closing in, leaving her no path of escape. A soft knock at her door startled her. Quickly wiping her eyes, she called, "Who is it?" "Abigail Gray," came the response. Katherine opened the door to find the schoolteacher looking concerned. "May I come in?" Once inside, Abigail didn't waste time. "I saw Emmett Blackwell arrived early. Jackson Thomas stopped by the schoolhouse and told me what happened. Mr. Thomas seems very concerned about my welfare," Katherine said, unsure whether to be touched or irritated by his interference. "With good reason," Abigail said firmly. "Katherine, I didn't want to say too much this morning, but you need to know the truth about Emmett Blackwell. His first wife died of fever, as he claims, but his second wife's death was suspicious." Katherine's blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" "She fell down the stairs at their ranch house. Broke her neck. Emmett claimed it was an accident, that she tripped. But Martha Blackwell had bruises on her arms and face that couldn't be explained by a fall." Abigail reached for Katherine's hands. There wasn't enough evidence for the sheriff to pursue it, but many in town believe Emmett was responsible. "Are you saying he murdered his wife?" Katherine whispered, horrified. "I'm saying he's a dangerous man with a temper, especially when he drinks. And he drinks often." Abigail squeezed her hands. "Jackson told me about his offer. You should take it. And what about the money my brother received?" "Mr. Blackwell made it clear he expects to get what he paid for. Jackson said he'd handle that." Abigail's expression was earnest. "He's a man of his word, Katherine." Katherine pulled her hands away, pacing the small room. "This is madness. I barely know Jackson Thomas. Why would he put himself at risk for me?" "Because that's the kind of man he is," Abigail said simply. "And because no one did it for Martha Blackwell when she needed help." The weight of the decision pressed down on Katherine. To reject Blackwell's claim on her meant defying her brother, breaking a financial agreement, and potentially causing trouble for Jackson. But to go through with the marriage now seemed like walking willingly into danger. "What would I need to do?" she asked finally. Relief washed over Abigail's face. "Pack your things. I'll come for you before dawn tomorrow. Jackson will meet us at the edge of town with horses. And Mr. Blackwell? Jackson will deal with him after you're safely away, Abigail assured her. Will you do it? After a moment's hesitation, Katherine nodded. Yes. I'll be ready. Sleep was impossible that night as Katherine lay fully clothed on her bed, her small carpet bag packed beside her. Every creak of the hotel settled her nerves on edge. Every footstep in the hallway made her heart race. What if Blackwell suspected something? What if he decided to claim his bride tonight rather than wait for the wedding? The hours crawled by until finally, just before the first hint of dawn lightened the sky, a soft tap came at her door. Katherine grabbed her bag and opened the door to find Abigail waiting. Ready? The schoolteacher whispered. Katherine nodded, following Abigail down the back stairs of the hotel and through the kitchen. They slipped out the rear door into the alley, keeping to the shadows as they made their way to the edge of town. True to his word, Jackson was waiting with 3 saddled horses. His face showed relief when he spotted them. Any trouble? He asked quietly. None, Abigail replied. The town's still asleep. Jackson turned to Katherine. Can you ride? Yes, though it's been some time, she admitted. He helped her mount a gentle-looking mare, his hands strong and steady at her waist. The brief contact sent a flutter through her stomach despite the tension of the moment. We'll ride for the starlight, Jackson said, swinging up onto his black stallion. It's about 2 hours at an easy pace. Abigail will come with us part way, then head back before she's missed. The 3 rode in silence as they left Promise Creek behind, following a trail that wound through scrubby hills and valleys. The dawn painted the landscape in shades of gold and pink, revealing a wild beauty that took Katherine's breath away despite her anxiety. After about an hour, they stopped to rest the horses by a small stream. Abigail embraced Katherine warmly. I'll see you soon, she promised, once things settle down. Thank you, Katherine said, overwhelmed by the schoolteacher's kindness. I don't know how I'll ever repay you. Just be happy, Abigail replied with a smile. That's repayment enough. After Abigail had ridden back toward town, Jackson and Katherine continued northward. The terrain grew more dramatic, with rocky outcroppings and stands of pine trees breaking up the open rangeland. What will happen when Mr. Blackwell discovers I'm gone? Katherine asked as they rode side by side. He'll be angry, Jackson admitted. But I've arranged to meet with him and settle things. You mean pay him? Katherine said, uncomfortable with the arrangement. I don't like being bought and sold, Mr. Thomas, even if you have better intentions than my brother or Mr. Blackwell. Jackson looked at her directly, his blue eyes serious. I'm not buying you, Katherine. I'm returning Blackwell's money, so he has no claim on you, legal or otherwise. There's a difference. And what will you expect in return? She asked, needing to understand her position clearly. I expect you to teach the children at my ranch, as I said. You'll have your own cabin, your privacy, and fair wages. His jaw tightened. I don't consider women property, Katherine. You'll be free to stay or leave as you choose. The sincerity in his voice eased some of her concerns. They rode in silence for a while, the rhythm of the horses' hooves soothing Katherine's frayed nerves. Tell me about the children I'll be teaching, she said finally. Jackson's expression lightened. There are 8 of them, ages 6 to 12. My foreman's 3 kids, plus 5 more belonging to my hands. Good children, though they've had little formal education. Most can read a bit, and they know basic sums. As he described each child, his obvious affection for them warmed Katherine toward him. This was not a man who saw people as possessions. There it is, Jackson said eventually, pointing ahead to where the land opened up into a broad valley. Starlight Ranch. Katherine's eyes widened as she took in the sprawling ranch. A large 2-story house of hewn logs stood proudly at the center of the property, with a wide porch wrapping around it. Nearby were a barn, bunkhouse, and several smaller cabins scattered around the yard. In the distance, cattle grazed on lush grass, their forms tiny specks against the vast landscape. It's beautiful, she breathed. Pride showed clearly on Jackson's face. Built most of it myself, with help from my men. Started with just that small cabin there. He pointed to a modest structure near a stand of cottonwood trees. That will be yours if it suits you. We can fix it up however you like. As they rode into the ranch yard, several men emerged from the barn and bunkhouse, looking curiously at Katherine. Jackson dismounted and helped her down from her horse, his hands lingering at her waist a moment longer than necessary. "Everyone," he called out to the gathering ranch hands. "This is Miss Katherine Daniels. She'll be teaching the children here at the Starlight." A tall man with sandy hair stepped forward, touching the brim of his hat. "Welcome, Miss Daniels. I'm Matthew Clark, foreman here. My boys will be mighty pleased to have a teacher." The others introduced themselves as well, all showing the same respectful courtesy. Katherine felt some of her tension ease in the face of their warm welcome. "Mrs. Hawkins runs the main house," Jackson explained as he led Katherine toward her cabin. "She'll help you get settled. We can discuss the schooling arrangements after you've had a chance to rest." The cabin was small but solid, with a main room that held a bed, table, chairs, and a small stove, plus a tiny second room that Jackson suggested could serve as her classroom until proper arrangements could be made. "It's not much," he said, looking slightly embarrassed. "But it's private and secure." "It's perfect," Katherine assured him, touched by his consideration. After the upheaval of the past days, the simple cabin felt like a sanctuary. "I need to ride back to town," Jackson said, lingering in the doorway, "to deal with Blackwell. Mrs. Hawkins will bring you anything you need. I should return by nightfall." Concern flooded Katherine's chest. "Is it dangerous? Confronting Mr. Blackwell?" Something warm flickered in Jackson's eyes at her worry. "I can handle Emmett Blackwell." "Be careful, please," she said softly. "And thank you for everything." He touched the brim of his hat, a small smile playing at his lips. "Welcome to Starlight Ranch, Miss Daniels." After he'd gone, Mrs. Hawkins, a motherly woman in her 50s, arrived with linens for the bed, towels, and a basket of food. "Mr. Thomas sent word ahead last night that you'd be coming," she explained as she helped Katherine make up the bed. "Said you needed a fresh start." "He's been very kind," Katherine said, unpacking her few belongings. Mrs. Hawkins smiled knowingly. "He's a good man, our Mr. Thomas. Built this ranch from nothing through hard work and fair dealing. Treats his men right, which is why they're loyal." Throughout the day, Katherine settled into the cabin, cleaning away dust and arranging her meager possessions. Mrs. Hawkins introduced her to the children, who regarded their new teacher with a mixture of shyness and curiosity. "When do we start learning, madam?" asked 10-year-old Timothy Clark, the foreman's eldest son. "Soon," Katherine promised. "Once I've had a chance to assess what each of you knows already." By evening, Katherine had begun to feel at home in the small cabin, though anxiety about Jackson's confrontation with Blackwell never fully left her mind. She sat on the small porch as the sun set, painting the valley in golden light that gave the ranch its name. The sound of approaching hoofbeats brought her to her feet. Relief washed through her as she recognized Jackson's tall form on his black stallion. But as he came closer, she could see he was riding stiffly, and when he dismounted in front of her cabin, she gasped at the sight of his bruised jaw and cut lip. "What happened?" she asked, hurrying down the porch steps. "Blackwell took the news about as well as expected," Jackson said dryly, wincing as he touched his jaw. "Come inside," Katherine insisted, taking his arm. "Let me tend to those cuts." Inside the cabin, she seated him at the table and poured water from the pitcher into a basin. With gentle hands, she cleaned the cut on his lip and the scrape along his cheekbone. "Did he accept the money?" she asked as she worked. Jackson nodded. "Eventually, after we had a discussion about the nature of marriage and whether people can be bought and sold." "You fought over me," Katherine said, distressed. "I fought over a principle," Jackson corrected. "No man has the right to buy a woman, and no brother has the right to sell his sister." The fierce conviction in his voice stirred something in Katherine's heart. "And Mr. Blackwell agreed?" "Let's just say I was persuasive," Jackson replied with a slight smile that quickly turned to a wince. "He took the money and promised to leave you alone. Your brother's debt is considered paid. And what about your money? $500 is a considerable sum." Jackson caught her hand as she dabbed at his cut. "Consider it an investment in the education of the Starlight Ranch children." His warm fingers around her wrist sent a flutter through Katherine's stomach. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the air between them seemed charged with unspoken possibilities. The moment broke when a knock came at the door. Mrs. Hawkins had brought dinner for both of them, a hearty stew, fresh bread, and apple pie. Thought you might be hungry after your ride, Mr. Thomas, she said, giving them a knowing look that made Katherine blush. After Mrs. Hawkins left, they ate together at the small table, Jackson telling Katherine about the ranch operations and his plans for the children's education. I was thinking we could convert the old storage barn into a proper schoolhouse, he said. It has good light and enough space for desks and a blackboard. That sounds wonderful, Katherine agreed, touched by his enthusiasm for the project. I'll need books and supplies. Make a list of what you need. I'll send Matthew to Colorado Springs next week for supplies. Jackson studied her across the table. Are you happy with this arrangement, Katherine? Truly. The question, asked with such genuine concern, warmed her. Yes, she said honestly. It's more than I dared hope for when I arrived in Promise Creek. Good. He stood, wincing slightly. I should let you rest. It's been a long day. At the door, he turned back to her. Blackwell won't trouble you, but if you ever feel unsafe or uncomfortable here, you tell me immediately. Your well-being matters to me. Thank you, Jackson, she said softly, using his first name for the first time. For everything. His eyes softened at her use of his name. Good night, Katherine. As she prepared for bed that night, Katherine reflected on the extraordinary turn her life had taken. 3 days ago, she had been on her way to a loveless marriage with a man who saw her as property. Now she was free, with meaningful work and a place of her own. And then there was Jackson Thomas, with his kind eyes and protective nature, who had risked himself to give her this chance. Katherine wasn't naive enough to miss the attraction between them, but she appreciated that he had made no demands, asked for nothing in return for his help except that she teach the children. For the first time since leaving Boston, Katherine felt hopeful about her future. The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity as Katherine settled into life at Starlight Ranch. The old storage barn was quickly transformed into a schoolhouse, with Jackson and his men building desks and benches while Katherine organized the books and supplies that arrived from Colorado Springs. The children proved eager students, especially once they realized learning could be enjoyable. Katherine found herself looking forward to each day, watching her pupils' faces light up with understanding when they mastered a new concept. Jackson often stopped by the schoolhouse to observe lessons or help with repairs and improvements. Katherine became accustomed to his presence, looking forward to their conversations about the children's progress or books they had both read. Sometimes he brought her wildflowers he'd found while riding the range, presenting them with a slight smile that made her heart beat faster. One Saturday afternoon about a month after her arrival, Katherine was hanging student artwork in the schoolhouse when Jackson appeared in the doorway. The children are coming along nicely, he commented, admiring a drawing of the ranch by young Timothy Clark. They're wonderful students, Katherine agreed, eager to learn and not afraid of hard work. Like their teacher, Jackson said, his blue eyes warm as they met hers. Katherine felt heat rise to her cheeks at the compliment. I'm just doing my job. You're doing far more than that. You've brought something special to this ranch, Katherine. He hesitated, then added, I have a proposal for you. Her heart skipped a beat at his choice of words, though she knew he didn't mean it in the romantic sense. Tomorrow's Sunday, he continued. I thought you might enjoy a picnic by the lake on the north side of the property. It's peaceful there, and the view is spectacular. A picnic, Katherine repeated, surprised and pleased by the invitation. If you'd like, Jackson said, suddenly looking uncharacteristically uncertain. Mrs. Hawkins has already offered to pack a basket. I'd love to, Katherine said sincerely. His smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. I'll come for you around noon then. That night, Katherine found herself fretting over what to wear, finally settling on her blue cotton dress, the nicest of her 3 dresses. Mrs. Hawkins had helped her take it in and add some simple embroidery to the collar, transforming it from merely serviceable to something quite pretty. The next day dawned clear and warm, a perfect late spring day for a picnic. Katherine was ready when Jackson knocked on her door at noon, looking handsome in clean denims and a white shirt with a blue vest that matched his eyes. He whistled softly when he saw her. You look beautiful, Katherine. Thank you, she replied, pleased by his admiration. Mrs. Hawkins helped me with some alterations. Remind me to give that woman a raise, he said with a grin, offering his arm. They rode double on his horse, Katherine seated in front of Jackson, his arms around her to hold the reins. The closeness was both thrilling and unsettling, his chest warm against her back, his breath occasionally stirring her hair. The lake was as beautiful as Jackson had promised, a clear blue expanse nestled among pine-covered hills. They spread a blanket on a grassy spot overlooking the water, and Katherine unpacked the generous lunch Mrs. Hawkins had prepared: fried chicken, biscuits, pickled vegetables, and apple pie. "This is lovely," Katherine said as they ate. "I didn't realize there was such a beautiful lake on your property." "It's one of my favorite places," Jackson admitted. "I come here to think sometimes, when ranch business gets overwhelming." "Do you ever regret it?" Katherine asked. "Taking on so much responsibility?" Jackson considered the question thoughtfully. "No. Building something that matters, creating a place where people can work with dignity and raise families, that's worth the headaches." "You've created something wonderful here," Katherine said sincerely. "It was lonely sometimes," he admitted, his eyes on the distant mountains, "watching my men go home to their families while I returned to an empty house." The vulnerability in his admission touched Katherine deeply. "Is that why you wanted a school at the ranch? To have children around?" "Partly," he agreed, "but mostly because education matters. My father was a schoolteacher back in Pennsylvania. He taught me that learning opens doors." "I didn't know that," Katherine said, surprised by this glimpse into his past. "Not many do." Jackson turned to look at her directly. "I don't often speak of my family. My parents died in a fire when I was 18. I came west afterward, needing a fresh start." "I'm so sorry," Katherine said softly, instinctively reaching for his hand. He twined his fingers with hers. "It was a long time ago, but I never forgot what my father taught me about the importance of education." "Is that why you helped me?" Katherine asked. "Because you needed a teacher?" Jackson's thumb traced gentle circles on the back of her hand. "I helped you because no person should be bought and sold like property. I asked you to teach here because you're qualified and the children need education." His eyes held hers intently. "I invited you on this picnic because I'm falling in love with you." Katherine's breath caught at his direct declaration. In the weeks she'd known him, Jackson had always been straightforward, but this blunt admission of his feelings still took her by surprise. "Jackson, you don't need to say anything," he interrupted gently. "I know it's soon, and you're still settling into your new life here. I just wanted you to know how I feel." "I care for you too," Katherine admitted, her heart pounding. "More than I thought possible in such a short time." Joy spread across his face. "I promised when you came here that you'd be free to make your own choices. That hasn't changed. Whatever grows between us will be because we both want it, not because of any obligation." "I've never met a man like you," Katherine said softly. "Someone who values a woman's independence as much as her affection." "I've never met a woman like you," he countered. "Brave enough to flee an arranged marriage and start fresh among strangers." "I had help," she reminded him with a smile. "You had courage," he insisted. "I just provided the opportunity." They talked for hours as the sun moved across the sky, sharing stories of their pasts and dreams for the future. When Jackson finally helped her back onto his horse for the ride home, something had shifted between them, a deeper understanding, a foundation for something that might grow into lasting love. At her cabin door, Jackson took her hand and raised it to his lips. "Thank you for today, Katherine." "Thank you for inviting me," she replied, reluctant to say goodnight. He hesitated, then slowly leaned forward, giving her time to step away if she wished. Instead, Katherine lifted her face to his, and their lips met in a gentle kiss that sent warmth spiraling through her body. When they parted, Jackson's eyes were dark with emotion. "Good night, Katherine," he said, his voice husky. "Good night, Jackson," she whispered. Inside her cabin, Katherine touched her fingers to her lips, still feeling the gentle pressure of his kiss. For the first time in her life, she was falling in love not because it was arranged or expected, but because her heart had chosen freely. The next few weeks brought a deepening of their relationship. Jackson often joined Katherine for dinner at her cabin, or invited her to the main house, where Mrs. Hawkins served meals that far surpassed Katherine's limited cooking skills. They took rides across the ranch property on Sundays, Jackson proudly showing her the extent of his land and introducing her to the beauty of the Colorado wilderness. One evening in late June, as they sat on her porch watching the sunset paint the valley in shades of gold and purple, Jackson turned to her with a serious expression. "I received word that Emmett Blackwell left Promise Creek. he said. Sold his ranch and headed to Montana Territory. Katherine felt a weight lift from her shoulders at the news. Although Jackson had assured her that Blackwell had accepted the situation, she had always harbored a fear that the older man might try to reassert his claim on her. That's a relief, she admitted. Though I'm sorry if our situation forced him to leave his home. Don't waste sympathy on Blackwell, Jackson said firmly. The man's had 3 wives and treated none of them with the respect they deserved. I'm just grateful I escaped becoming the 4th Mrs. Blackwell, Katherine said with a shudder. Thanks to you. Jackson took her hand, his expression growing more serious. There's something else. Your brother wrote to Hiram Wilson in Promise Creek, asking after you. Apparently, Blackwell contacted him before leaving town. Katherine tensed. Samuel knows I didn't marry Blackwell? Yes, and he knows you're here at Starlight Ranch. Jackson squeezed her hand reassuringly. He can't force you to do anything, Katherine. You're an adult, and you're under my protection now. He'll be angry, Katherine said, knowing her brother's temper. He'll feel I've embarrassed him. Let him be angry, Jackson said firmly. He sold his own sister. He has no moral high ground to stand on. Katherine leaned against Jackson's shoulder, drawing comfort from his solid presence. I never want to see him again, she confessed. Is that terrible of me? No, Jackson said, wrapping his arm around her. It's self-preservation. They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to appear in the darkening sky. Katherine felt safe in Jackson's embrace, protected not because she was his possession, but because he respected her worth as a person. I love you, Katherine, Jackson said softly into her hair. I know it's only been 2 months since you came here, but I'm certain of my feelings. Katherine turned in his arms to face him. I love you too, Jackson. His kiss was tender at first, then deepened with a passion that made her breath catch. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing heavily. I should go, Jackson said reluctantly, though he made no move to release her. Yes, Katherine agreed, equally reluctant to end their evening. With a sigh, Jackson stood and helped her to her feet. I'll see you tomorrow. Tomorrow, she echoed, already looking forward to it. As July turned to August, the ranch grew busy with preparations for the fall roundup. Katherine continued teaching the children, but also began helping Mrs. Hawkins with the increased cooking duties as additional hands arrived for the seasonal work. One afternoon, she was returning from the schoolhouse when she noticed an unfamiliar horse tied at the hitching post in front of the main house. A chill ran through her as she recognized the bay gelding it was Samuel's horse. Her first instinct was to hide in her cabin, but Katherine squared her shoulders. She was no longer the frightened young woman who had arrived in Promise Creek. With newfound confidence, she walked toward the main house. Inside, she found Jackson and Samuel facing each other in the parlor, tension thick in the air. Samuel looked much as she remembered handsome in a sharp-featured way, his clothes expensive despite his financial troubles. Katherine, Samuel said when he spotted her. There you are. I've come to take you back to Boston. Hello, Samuel, she replied coolly. I'm not going anywhere. Samuel's face hardened. Don't be ridiculous. This situation is completely inappropriate. Living alone on a ranch with unmarried men? Your reputation is in tatters. My reputation is intact, Katherine countered. I'm employed as a teacher here, with my own private quarters. The arrangement is perfectly respectable. You were promised to Emmett Blackwell, Samuel insisted. I received payment. You sold me. Katherine interrupted, anger finally breaking through. Like I was cattle. Did you really expect me to marry a man 3 times my age without protest? It was for your own good, Samuel blustered. You had no prospects in Boston after Father's death. It was for your good, Katherine corrected. To pay your gambling debts. Jackson, who had remained silent during this exchange, finally spoke. Mr. Daniels, your sister has made her choice clear. She's staying at Starlight Ranch. Samuel turned on him furiously. This is none of your concern, Thomas. She's my sister, and I'll decide what's best for her. Katherine is a grown woman capable of making her own decisions, Jackson replied evenly. And she has decided to remain here. As what? Samuel sneered. Your mistress? Jackson's hands clenched into fists, but Katherine stepped forward before he could respond. That's enough, Samuel, she said firmly. I am not Jackson's mistress. I am a teacher respected for my work with the children here. And I am a woman who refuses to be sold to pay her brother's debts. You've changed, Samuel said, looking at her with surprise. Yes, Katherine agreed. I have. Samuel's gaze shifted between Katherine and Jackson, noting their protective stance toward each other. I see how it is, he said bitterly. You've set your cap for a wealthy rancher. Clever, Katherine. I didn't think you had it in you. You never really knew me at all, Katherine replied sadly. Just as you never understood that people aren't commodities to be traded for profit. Blackwell wants his money back, Samuel said, changing tactics. Says the deal wasn't fulfilled. Blackwell received his money back from me, Jackson interjected. In full, plus interest. He has no claim on Katherine or you. Samuel looked surprised, then calculating. And what do you want in return, Thomas? My sister's hand in marriage? Her virtue. I want Katherine's happiness, Jackson said simply. Whatever form that takes. The sincerity in his voice seemed to finally penetrate Samuel's anger. He looked at Katherine with new eyes, seeing the confidence and determination that had replaced her former timidity. You truly wish to stay here? He asked, his tone less hostile. I do, Katherine confirmed. I've found purpose here, Samuel. And freedom. After a long moment, Samuel nodded stiffly. Very well. I won't force you to return. But understand this, if you stay, you're no longer my responsibility. You're on your own. I've been on my own since the moment you arranged my marriage to Blackwell, Katherine pointed out. Nothing changes except now we both acknowledge it. Samuel left shortly afterward, his farewell stiff and formal. Katherine watched him ride away with mixed emotions, relief that he had accepted her decision, sadness for the familial bond that had been broken perhaps beyond repair. Jackson stood beside her, his hand warm on the small of her back. Are you all right? Yes, she said, surprised to find it was true. I feel free. You always were, Jackson said. You just needed to realize it. That evening, they walked along the creek that ran through the property, the setting sun gilding the landscape in golden light. Jackson seemed uncharacteristically nervous, stopping abruptly in a grove of cottonwood trees. Katherine, he began, taking both her hands in his. These past months have been the happiest of my life. Having you here at Starlight has brought a joy I never expected to find. Katherine's heart began to race as she recognized the seriousness of his manner. I promised when you came here that you would be free to make your own choices, Jackson continued. That hasn't changed. But I find myself hoping that you might choose to stay, not just as our teacher, but as my wife. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. Opening it, he revealed a delicate gold ring set with a single diamond that caught the last rays of sunlight. I love you, Katherine Daniels, Jackson said, his blue eyes intense with emotion. Will you marry me? Not because anyone arranged it or because society expects it, but because you want to, because you choose me as I have chosen you. Tears of happiness welled in Katherine's eyes. Yes, she whispered. Yes, Jackson, I choose you. His face lit with joy as he slipped the ring onto her finger, then drew her into his arms for a kiss that promised a lifetime of love freely given and received. You're not property, Katherine, he murmured against her lips. You never were. You're my partner, my equal, the woman I want to build a life with. And you're the man who showed me what real love looks like, she replied, her heart overflowing with happiness. Not a transaction or an arrangement, but a choice made from the heart. They were married 2 weeks later in the small church in Promise Creek, with Abigail Gray as Katherine's attendant and Matthew Clark standing up for Jackson. The entire ranch turned out for the celebration, the children from Katherine's class presenting her with a handmade quilt as a wedding gift. After the ceremony, Jackson surprised Katherine by taking her to a clearing near the lake where a new cabin stood larger than her teacher's quarters, with a wide porch and windows that captured the magnificent view. Our home, he said, sweeping her into his arms to carry her across the threshold. Built with my own hands. Inside, Katherine found a home designed with both of them in mind, bookshelves for her growing collection, a desk where she could prepare lessons, comfortable furniture arranged before a stone fireplace, and a bedroom with a large four-poster bed that made her blush when Jackson showed it to her with a knowing smile. It's perfect, she whispered, overwhelmed by the thought and care he had put into creating their home. Not quite, Jackson said. leading her back to the main room where he unveiled a portrait hanging above the fireplace her parents, recreated from the small photograph she kept among her treasured possessions. "How did you?" Katherine asked, tears filling her eyes. "I sent the photograph to an artist in Denver," Jackson explained. "I wanted them to be part of our home, part of our new beginning." Katherine threw her arms around him, overcome with emotion. "I love you so much, Jackson Thomas." "And I love you, Mrs. Thomas," he replied, holding her close. "For now and always." Their life together unfolded with the changing seasons. Katherine continued teaching the ranch children, eventually expanding the school to include children from neighboring ranches as well. Jackson's business prospered, the Starlight becoming one of the most successful cattle operations in Colorado Territory. A year after their wedding, their first child was born, a daughter they named Tessa, with her father's blue eyes and her mother's auburn hair. 2 years later, a son joined their family, Thomas Jackson Thomas, called TJ to avoid confusion. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Jackson and Katherine sat on the porch of their home, watching their children play in the yard as the setting sun turned the valley to gold, giving the Starlight Ranch the magical glow that had inspired its name. "Are you happy, Katherine?" Jackson asked, his arm around her shoulders. She leaned into his embrace, thinking of the frightened young woman who had arrived in Promise Creek 5 years earlier, sold by her brother to a man who saw her as property. That woman could never have imagined the life she now lived, married to a man who cherished her mind as much as her heart, mother to 2 beautiful children, respected teacher to a growing number of students, and mistress of a prosperous ranch. "Happier than I ever dreamed possible," she replied, turning to kiss her husband. "Because I was given the greatest gift of all." "What's that?" Jackson asked, his eyes warm with love. "The freedom to choose my own path," Katherine said. "And I chose you." As the stars appeared above Starlight Ranch, Jackson and Katherine Thomas held each other close, their love a testament to the truth he had recognized from the beginning, that the greatest love grows not from possession, but from respect, not from obligation, but from choice. And in the years that followed, as their family grew and the Starlight Ranch prospered, they never forgot the lesson at the heart of their story, that no person is another's property, and true love can only flourish in the soil of freedom.